This fifth session I've entitled Unity of the Scriptures. It's sort of a bridge between what we just studied with the Passover Exodus and the Passion Week and crucifixion and resurrection. You see here I'm titling this, Jesus Not the New Kid on the Block. Jesus didn't show up for the first time 2,000 years ago. So I just want to go over a few scriptures on this. First of all, he is and was pre-existent. John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him not anything made that was made. And John 17:24, Father, I desire that they also whom you've given me may be with me where I am, to see my glory that you have given me, because you loved me before the foundation of the world. And then John 8:58, Jesus said to them, Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Next, let's look at some of the appearances in the Tanakh. Tanakh refers to Torah, Nevi'im, which is the prophets, and Ketuvim, which is the writing, but what many call the Old Testament. Abraham 18:1, and the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing in front of him. When he saw them, he ran to the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth, saying, O Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. So that would have been Jesus meeting Abraham at the oaks of Mamre. At the burning bush, Exodus 3:4-6. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush. Moses, Moses, he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not come near, take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face. He was afraid to look at God. And then Mount Sinai in Exodus 24. Then Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders went up, and they saw the God of Israel. There was under his feet as if it were a pavement of sapphire stone, like the heavens for clearness. So that was God pre-existing and before the apostolic period. Then with the Gospels in Matthew and Luke, I'm not going to go into detail here, but you have the genealogy that traced things in Matthew forward to Jesus from Abraham, and then in Luke going back from Jesus all the way back to Adam. And in Matthew 5:17-19, Jesus affirms the Torah. There was no change in the Torah. What is nomos in Greek, which is usually translated law, but it's not as accurate as just referring to Torah. So in Matthew 5:17, do not think I have come to abolish the Torah or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one iota, not a dot will pass from the Torah until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Another type of the continuity on our next slide is Jesus. I call Jesus in geography. Jesus, the living word, knew the Bible in its context and applied it accordingly. Many of his messages were done in specific geographical places. For example, the first one we have is the woman at the well, at Sychar, but Sychar was in a mile of Shechem, and Shechem is where Abraham first covenanted with God. It's where you had the incident with the men of Shechem, with Simeon and Levi. It's actually where Joseph stopped to on the way to meet his brothers in Dayton before he was taken into Egypt. It was the place of the blessings and the cursings between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim and some other significant things. And so right here is where Jesus appears to the woman at the well. The second, Jesus raises a widow's son from the dead in the town of Nain on the same Mount Moriah as Shunem, where Elisha raised the widow's son centuries before, and the people there saw the significance that he did a similar miracle Elisha did in the same. It was actually on the other side of the same mountain. The third, Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River, the same river the Israelites crossed on the way to Jericho upon entering the Promised Land, and they spent 40 days in the wilderness. This was the Judean wilderness, although not the same place as the Red Sea crossing, or the 40 years in the wilderness. The parallels are unmistaken, where there's a crossing of water and then 40 years or 40 days in the wilderness. Perhaps the most interesting is in Matthew 16, where Jesus is in Caesarea Philippi. That's right below Mount Hermon, the highest mountain in Israel, in ancient Bashan, at the base of Mount Hermon there. And in Matthew 16, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is where Jesus asked Peter, "But who do you say that I am?" Or we asked the disciples, and Simon Peter replied, "You are Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon by Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who's in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." And the gates of hell was a hole in the rock at the base of what was considered a historic satanic center. And you see the next slide. You see that's actually a Torah picture of where he was, that gates of hell. And it's interesting, when I was on the cross, he quoted back in several places to Psalm 22, which is about him being on the cross. And verse 12, he talks about being opposed by strong bulls of Bashan. And so this was the beginning of... Actually, this is the time that Jesus told his disciples he'd be going to the cross. So this was real significant. Next, we'll be covering the Passion Week and the crucifixion, resurrection.